for the regular council meeting for Monday, 2013, September 23 at 7 p.m. And we'll start by calling the meeting to order and ask Ms. King if there's any late items, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are adding an update from Mayor Rattan regarding the Vancouver Island Conference Centre Hotel under the Mayor's report. We are adding a delegation from Mr. Ron Boland to the Covenant Amendment Report, which is item 8A. And we are deleting the report with respect to 236 Halliburton Street, which is item 8H. And we are deleting properties at 354 Watfield Avenue and 6318 Waterbury Road from the Property Maintenance Report, which is item 8I. And that's it for the late items, Your Worship. Okay, thank you. And we'll start off by a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And adoption, a motion to adopt the minutes. A and B, please.
So moved.
Moved A and B. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move right down into presentations. The first presentation is Mr. Randy Alexander, General Manager of Regional and Community Utilities, Regional District of Nanaimo, to provide a presentation regarding an amendment to the RDN Liquid Waste Management Plan. Mr. Alexander, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for having me here today to speak to you about the Liquid Waste Management Plan amendment that we have underway at the RDN. My name is Randy Alexander, and I'm the GM of Regional and Community Utilities at the Regional District, and that's all about water and wastewater. And we're in the process right now of amending our Liquid Waste Management Plan. Within the Regional District, we provide sewage treatment services for everyone that's on sewer in the Regional District. And with respect to the City of Nanaimo, that's at the Greater Nanaimo Wastewater Treatment Plant. The Liquid Waste Management Plant is fundamentally our authorization from the provincial government to discharge wastewater into the environment. It includes commitments for the timing of capital upgrades and expenditures for treatment of wastewater. And that's fundamental to what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So the Liquid Waste Management Plan is a lot more than just treating wastewater. There are a number of components to it. I'm not going to go into the 10 programs that we have tonight, but they are regarding supporting operation of on-site systems, septic systems, reducing wastewater production and protecting water resources, programs to utilize the resources in wastewater, and then again, wastewater treatment programs. So as I mentioned, the Liquid Waste Management Plan is our regulatory authority to discharge wastewater. And provincial and federal laws both require secondary wastewater treatment. Greater Nanaimo and the Nanoose treatment plants within the RDN must be upgraded because they only provide primary treatment. So primary treatment is basically settling of solids out of wastewater. The secondary treatment component is a biological treatment that further reduces organics and solids in the wastewater. So federal and provincial requirements require upgrading of those treatment plants to secondary treatment. The province has enabled a process called the Liquid Waste Management Planning Process that provides a mechanism to allow local and regional governments to get from where they are in treatment levels to the provincial standards within a reasonable time frame that takes into account, economic realities and social and environmental considerations as well. So it gives us an ability to recommend a time frame. The original Liquid Waste Management Plan that we're working under was adopted and approved by the province in 1999. We've been in the process of working on an amendment since 2008. So for several years we've been working towards an amendment with advisory committee meetings and studies with members of the public and agencies. Ministry of Environment has been involved in a number of reviews. And we're at the point now where we want to move this forward to submit an amendment to the minister by the end of the year so that we can move forward with plans for upgrading treatment. There's a few points that I think are very important to make about the Liquid Waste Management Plan. The first is that, once the liquid waste management plan is approved by the RDN and then subsequently the Environment Minister, it can be implemented without further approvals or referendum, and that includes the authority to borrow funds towards implementing the plan, so any capital works that are required as part of the plan. This is because it's a regulatory requirement to meet these standards, and so the legislation, the Environmental Management Act, provides that mechanism. Because of this, adequate consultation is extremely important. So it's important that community members understand the liquid waste management plan, the process, what solutions are proposed, and the associated costs to the taxpayers. So towards that end, we're in the process of undertaking a public consultation right now. The process right now includes mail-outs, print and media ads and articles. We have a pretty robust internet website that has a tremendous amount of information. We're in the middle of 12 public meetings right now. We have one in Parksville tonight. We had a meeting, a Nanaimo public meeting on September 9th. First Nations engagement is also an important component of the process. And the final decision on approving this plan will be made by the Environment Minister. It's a political decision by the Environment Minister, not by staff. We will put forward, the board, RDN board will put forward an amendment to the minister, and the minister will make a decision based in part on how she feels about the adequacy of the consultation and the various other factors she takes into account. So just touching briefly on the Greater Nanaimo Pollution Control Center. The plan approved in 1999, which we submitted in 97, included a commitment to upgrade Greater Nanaimo plant by 2015. We've been working towards that. However, what we want to do is submit an amendment that seeks approval for a revised completion date based on some technical considerations regarding an increase in scope in the project. We now have to replace the outfall as well. As well as to better manage the tax implications of the increased cost. So the slide here, which is a little hard to see, shows the red line going out into the ocean is the outfall. It needs to be replaced. It was built 40 years ago. It's a lined steel pipe. We're having significant problems with corrosion, so the board of the RDN has decided to replace that as an urgent matter. So that's now integrated into the project and has significantly changed the scope of the project. Secondary treatment basically is, as I mentioned, is adding on biological treatment and further settling to the existing plant, which is located just off Hammond Bay Road near Neck Point Park. The options we're looking at that we're going forward to the community for consultation on are completing by 2016, completing by 2018, and completing by 2019. There are a number of evaluation criteria that will weigh in making a decision on that. There's technical criteria, the challenges in completing a project like that within a certain time frame, environmental criteria, the sooner we upgrade, the sooner we improve the effluent quality, social criteria in terms of what are the potential impacts to the local residents of the construction activities, and economic impacts in terms of cost to taxpayers. The schedule I've put up on the overhead shows the option 2 schedule, which would be completion in 2018. So the capital cost estimates for this project, for the outfall replacement is $18 million, and for secondary treatment is $61 million. The graph that I've provided shows on the vertical axis the annual tax requisition for sewage, and then on the horizontal axis dates from 2013 to 2022. You can see that the green line is completion in 2019, red line is 2018, and blue is 2016. The cost to taxpayers increases the quicker we do this, and that's primarily because of the cost of borrowing. We'll be borrowing money we'll be borrowing more money, and we'll be borrowing it sooner. So that has a tremendous impact, or a significant impact. This is information that the Minister of Environment likes us to provide. to taxpayers in advance so they can understand the potential implications. So we've shown the three options here that we're looking at. The average 2013 tax rate for a taxpayer is $104. Now, that would, for option 2, say 2018, that would increase to $238 in 2022, and that's an average annual increase of $15. So this graph or this table basically shows you the different costs for the different options, and also considering whether there are any federal or provincial grants. At this time, there's no money from the federal or provincial governments for grants toward infrastructure projects like this. However, we'll continue to pursue them in the event that they do become available, and we're working with the provincial government towards that end. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. That slide is just showing the open house agenda that we have for our public meetings. And at that,
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, there will be, and thank you for the presentation. We've got several now, but I just had a couple of questions. It's outside Nanaimo, but Lanceville itself has a small portion that's covered by sewer. Is that fed into your system, into the RDN system now?
That's
that
correct.
Portion of the
That's
sewer that's
correct.
there at sanitary sewer?
That's treated by the Greater Nanaimo Treatment Center.
Okay, and the other one, you're laying a new pipe to replace the 40-year-old one that's near the end of its life. And I missed, is the placement going to be very, very close to the existing? Is it going to parallel the existing pipe, or what distance between the new one going out and the old one that's being replaced?
It will likely parallel the existing one very closely. We're having our consultants will look at that as part of the evaluation to make sure that that still makes sense, but it's likely with the 40 years of experience at that location, it will continue to be there.
Okay, and my final question, and there's others, is you talked in your presentation about the RDN can borrow without approval for this type of investment, and the associated cost to the taxpayers was going to be provided or submitted. And I'm just wondering, in this case, and maybe our staff the city staff can actually step in as well on this thing. I'm wondering what portion of this cost would normally be borne by the Nanaimo taxpayer as opposed to the RDN individually.
So the city of Nanaimo pays based on their portion of the treatment costs, so their portion of the total flow to the treatment center, and then that's allocated by the Nanaimo tax to individual taxpayers.
Okay,
so that's where that $104 came from.
Okay, I'm just, in your presentation you mentioned that and provide the associated cost to the taxpayers, and that's what I was kind of looking for. Mr. Swaby, are you able to give us an indication of what that might or might not be?
Well, Your Worship, in the presentation, and the presenter can correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I heard, based on a $91 million project, that it would be $18 per household. And to be honest with you, we haven't looked at the numbers, and we would have to discuss that with the region and then understand how that came to that conclusion.
Okay.
In Victoria, it's in the neighborhood of $250 per household based on a capital project of about 10 times the amount. So
Okay.
I'd have to look at that.
That's good, just thank you. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Alexander, very much. The Mayor already alluded to my first question, but I still want to go a bit further. Is a lifespan that's 27 years shorter than was anticipated, is that unusual?
There's not a lot of information. The pipe is steel. That's not commonly what the pipes are made of now. They're plastic now. So I think it's, at the time it was built, it was anticipated that it would last almost 80 years, but I don't think there was a lot of experience with that material in that environment at the time. So, yeah.
And the follow-up question that I have, on the fact sheet that you provided us with, 3 options, 2016, 2018, and 2019. Other than the financial implications, in almost every instance, be that social considerations or economic considerations, 2019 seems to be the obvious one, then, with the least impact. And with mitigation possibilities that are no different from the previous 2 choices. So why would you have 3 choices if?
Well, our original commitment to the Environment Minister was 2015, so the ministry is interested in us trying to achieve that as closely as possible, and so that's why we've provided those three options, so that we can get some feedback from the public. Does the public feel that that's an important issue, that we need to replace that sooner rather than later, and get a sense of that?
Would you disagree when I say that, by what I'm reading here, that intrinsically 2019 is as good as any other year?
Sorry? 2019 is?
Well, again, social considerations, economic considerations, what else have we got here? General comments, everything seems to, unless I'm reading it wrong, but it conveys to me the message that while you say the quicker we do this, the better, that 2019 seems to be very acceptable in almost every aspect.
Yeah, I think the area where 2019 there may be an issue is that it's pushing it out later rather than earlier from the perspective of the ministry.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. And continuing on the same line, the annual maintenance costs, I know when my colleagues and I attended a seminar that was presented about the repair, replacement of the outfall. And there's constant necessity for divers to go down and plug holes and make necessary repairs to the line for the environment, for the pollution of the waters and the fisheries. Have you factored in those infrastructure costs?
Yes, that's factored into the costs that I've shown you tonight. The intent is that the outfall will be replaced by 2015, and it's just the completion of the rest of the secondary treatment project that we're looking at options for different dates.
For different dates,
2015 is the date for the outfall
For the
replacement.
outfall, okay. What are the annual costs of repair and maintenance?
You know, I don't have that on my fingertips. I can get that information, though.
Good, thank you.
I guess that would largely depend on the product. If it's going to be plastic now, it presumably will stand up better than steel, hopefully, in the salt environment. Councillor Kip.
Thank you. Can you go back a couple slides to the graph that showed that one? This is a capital cost estimate. Have we contingency in it? Typically, if I extend a contract by 3 years, the cost usually goes up. Is that contingent in even in this tax cost comparison?
So no, this is based on a capital cost, a fixed capital cost based on 2012 estimate of $61 million. So we haven't revised that based on moving the date of completion down.
Yeah, see, because I mean, I know it's typically we've got 2 years planning now to 2016, because it's 2014 almost, and then up to 19. There could be a dramatic change, and our original costing is 2012.
Yeah. So there will be
preliminary 7-year difference.
Preliminary engineering will take place over the next 10 months, and that will firm up that cost a great deal. So right now it is a cost based on plus or minus 30%, so that you can compare the options.
Thank you.
Councillor Bessy.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for your presentation. The numbers on the business plan as presented doesn't include any senior level government funding. Is there any reason to suggest or any optimism that there may be that would clearly reduce the impact on taxpayers, locally, at least on their household?
There may be, but we don't have any firm indication that would be the case. Right now, a lot of the federal funding is tied up with a requirement for public-private partnerships. So that complicates the issue, but there is not a lot of federal money right now, but we are exploring that.
Thank you. And just to follow up, Your Worship, so you consider a lot of federal funding for 2014 is tied up with triple Ps, or is that looking further out than 14-15?
It would be the same no matter what the date we were looking at.
And if I may, Your Worship, then we would be within our purview to make a request or make an application?
Yes.
Albeit some of their funding or the majority of their funding still may be allocated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes.
And we'll be
we'll be
doing
pursuing that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Presumably, if this is on Hammond Bay Road and looking at the general area, this will be pretty much 100% funded by Nanaimo.
Yes, the 99% of the flow comes from Nanaimo.
Right, thank you. Supplemental. You got an $18 million surprise with the outfall. Are there any projects that you've looked at or any commitments to funding that you've looked at the RDN that would consider over the next 3 to 4 years retirement of debt on existing projects? For example, your office building or a public works facility or some such thing like that that could be timed in to prevent an increase in debt, but rather conversion of that debt as it retires to new.
I'm not aware of any, but I can look into that.
Thank you.
Okay, sir, I see no further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, the next item is the Mayor's Report on 6A, and I'm to provide an update regarding the Vancouver Island Conference Centre Hotel. And I think we do have some slides, and I guess we're going to sort of sing along with Mitch, are we, on this one here? So that, thank you for that assistance. Let me turn off the podium mic here. Before proceeding any further with tonight's meeting, I'd like to provide the community with a short update on the work taking place to build a new 21-story downtown hotel adjacent to the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. And I am pleased. There's before you can see the conception of it. It's in the back of the picture there. It is going to be approximately 240 rooms and 21 stories. So as you can see, it's quite an innovative and modernistic design. Progress on this important downtown project continues at a good pace. And of notable interest, the first round of conditions outlined in the purchase and sale agreement of the city-owned land have now been signed off. Also of interest, a development permit application from GBL Architects on the behalf of the land purchaser and the hotel operator, the future hotel operator, SS Manho Tourism Group, was recently received. This application is set to proceed to the Design Advisory Panel this Thursday, September 26th. These latest steps forward are encouraging news for those of us following this landmark project, which, once completed, will bring considerable tourism benefits to Vancouver Island and certainly to Nanaimo in particular. So we're very excited. We want to thank our staff, and I think Bill Corson, who may or may not be with us tonight, was quite instrumental in working this project through, as well as our senior staff. And a big thank you to staff as we proceed on this very, very exciting project. And I'm sure those connected with the conference center will also applaud this as we move forward. Okay, we're moving into Community Safety and Development. Item 8A, Covenant Amendment Application to CA1 at 3443 and 3355 Meadow Lane Road, 3360, 3370, and 3312 Hammond Bay Road. The purpose is to obtain council approval for a covenant amendment application for the properties located at the addresses I gave previously to change the beneficiary of the community contribution covenant registered through the previous zoning of the lands. We do have two delegations. The first delegation is Mr. Dave Hammond. Mr. Hammond, welcome, sir. You do have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mayor Rattan, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Hammond. I live at 3712 Glen Oaks Drive here in Nanaimo. I represent Nottingham Properties, the owner of the property currently being developed into a mix of single-family lots and townhomes at the corner of Hammond Bay Road and Nottingham Drive. This is the property that is referred to in Sheila Herrera's report. We believe the use of development community contributions to support local nonprofit organizations such as the United Way is a good idea. We believe it is especially true when the organization is as broad-based as the United Way. We support the application. Thank you for your time, and I can take any questions if you wish.
Okay, are there any questions for the delegation? Well, you must have outlined it very well. There's no questions on it. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Appreciate it. Now, the next delegation is Mr. Ron Boland. Welcome, sir. You also have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor Rutan and councillors, I come before you to speak to the item of the covenant amendment before you this evening. With the following point of view, I feel a bit like the Grinch maybe here, but I feel that to move to alter long-standing practices by changing a beneficiary on a required community contribution from the city and its parks to other interests, i.e. moving an amount set aside for park amenities to another agency outside the administration of the city, poses a number of major difficulties, including but not limited to: first, establishing a new precedent by moving public funds to other agencies by ad hoc methods. Two, creating a perception of possible favoritism towards some non-public agencies at the expense of the public or other agencies. And three, having that perception potentially tarnish both staff and council when similar suggestions from other developers are affirmed or denied. Staff should not be placed in the invidious position of making recommendations in such a matter as before you tonight, but should remove itself entirely from such a request, leaving the developer to bring the matter directly to council. As this is essentially a request for a grant, there is a process in place for obtaining grants from council which is direct and straightforward. In addition, I must note that the vast discrepancy between the quote appraised value of Unit 9, 327 Prideaux, given in the staff report as $275,000, and its assessed value for taxation of $33,300 is troubling. The reported reduced price of $215,000 for number 9, 327 Prideaux, which reflects the $60,000 transfer of funds from the existing covenant to the purchase of this property, raises significant questions about value which need to be examined. Why is the appraised value over 8 times higher than the taxable value at the assessed value of that same property, and the $60,000 grant requested in the covenant amendment before you this evening is nearly double the assessed property value? It must further be noted that number 9, 237 Prideaux carries an automatic exemption from the province of up to $10,000, as is the case for all Class 4, 5, and 6 properties, which has reduced its assessment by $9,200 and created a corresponding citywide deficit for residential taxpayers to make up an estimated citywide value of about $1 million. Accordingly, I ask that you, 1, not agree to the covenant amendment recommended by staff; 2, that you determine the total cost to Nanaimo taxpayers of the province's cavalier $10,000 assessment exemption to all holders of Class 4, 5, and 6 properties; and 3, explain to residential taxpayers the way in which assessment calculations in the various assessment categories affect their taxes. I would also ask the council consider a policy whereby monetary contributions, such as that of the $60,000 under discussion here, be collected when a covenant is granted, rather than as an indefinite loan to a developer, and that the money be placed in an interest-bearing reserve account for the purpose required in the covenant. Thank you.
Okay, sir. I see no questions at this time. Thank you very much. Oh, wait. Councillor Kim.
Yeah, I'd be more interested in the assessment value of the 10K assessment in the Class 4, 5, and 6. Could you explain that more on the 4, 5, and 6?
Yes, I have gone to the... as I started looking at properties downtown, I discovered that virtually every commercial property had an assessed exemption of $10,000. I tried to determine the source of this, and ended up at the assessment department talking to one of their people, and this is apparently a province-wide policy that every business in BC in class 4, 5, or 6 gets a $10,000 automatic exemption, or a lesser amount if the improvements on the property are worth less than $10,000. So that's where it comes from. It is a gift from the province to classes 4, 5, and 6. And because exemptions never reduce the costs of running the operation, any exemption to one party has to be made up by somebody else or everybody else. So we have exemptions in the city. I have a request in for information now on all of the gifts, grants, and exemptions that the city has, which must be made up by the rest of the tax-paying public.
Or something not paid for. Thank you.
Okay, I wondered, Mr. Sway, when you get a chance, I wondered, could you comment on this, on the allegation that the province allows $10,000 on virtually every commercial property, as stated?
I certainly don't have a great deal of information and can get back to council. It's a common practice, I understand, in the downtowns to do this, and it's certainly not a gift and not one that we have to make up anywhere else. It's the assessment authority assesses and provides the values of the properties. The lag in the values of the properties is associated with they don't review each property every year. So until there's a sale or until there's a reason that they have to be on the property to assess it, creates the difference between the assessed value and the appraised value. And of course, the appraised value is something we're more interested in terms of current value.
Okay. I might just make a comment myself on it, Mr. Boland. It's not, to my knowledge, the first example of this. I think some time ago, an architect here in town, a fairly well-known architect, Ian Nymeth, was making a request for funding, and I think his request at that time, he wanted it committed to the Nanaimo Arts, was it not? Remember the group?
That's correct.
So anyway, there is some precedence for it before. The other thing, one of the reasons I think that I feel, and certainly I would like to support this, but I'll hear the arguments before making a final decision on it. But that, and you alluded to yourself, one of the advantages of this particular plan is that we can get the money up front, if so to speak, and put it to use. Because quite often what happens with an amenity, and you pointed that out, is that it's a granted amenity, perhaps agreed to by both sides, but if the project doesn't proceed, it can be months and maybe years before, and then if it's removed and it's not built, the amenity is lost. So this particular one, while there might be issues that others wish to bring up on it, the point is that the money would be paid virtually up front, which has an advantage.
I understand that. My question, my longer-term question really is, shouldn't we look at that as a policy?
Yeah,
and
no, I
collect the
appreciate
money rather than giving this long-term, unknown length of time loan, basically.
Okay, we've got several more questions. Councillor Kipp, you're finished, so Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Boland, for your presentation. I must say I agree with a lot of your reasons to be careful of what we're doing with our donations in that regard. And I was just understand there has been some precedent, so we're not really in territory that we haven't been before. I would prefer to see the funds go to parks, but in this particular case, I agree with where we plan on putting it. I didn't quite follow all the assessment stuff, but that's for another day, I guess. But and I think I don't know if staff do we have a distinct policy on this? I understand that it's a sort of an ad hoc thing, and we each case is different, and so on and so forth. And there's no real. Maybe you could.
Your Worship, it might be appropriate to receive the delegation, and then we can assist council with some questions if you prefer.
Okay, so why don't we just hear the rest of the questions for the delegation?
So I would move to receive the delegations.
Okay.
No, that's right.
Is there a second?
That's okay, because we could
motion.
receive the delegation and then ask questions of our staff if that's.
Okay, unless there's questions for the delegation itself before we excuse them. Is there anyone that want to speak directly to the delegation? Okay, well then, Councillor Patchy, you're on.
Hello, Mr. Boland. And that's just an observation on my part. I completely understand where you're coming from. and that there is that aspect of slippery slope that if you do this once, you be required to do it again. In the 5 years that I've been here, I can recall 2 instances where, not quite a similar request, but to an extent it was, which we turned down on both occasions. So as far as I know, this is the first one, in my time at least, that we are doing this. And I have to tell you, I attended the kickoff breakfast for United Way a couple of mornings ago. No, as councillors, we also have to look at the greater good of the whole thing and the totally amazing work that they do and the contributions that they make here are, in my opinion, I'm not finished yet, are, in my opinion, very worthwhile of consideration in this particular instance. So I'm going to support it because ultimately it is my belief that this municipality gets back a lot more than $60,000 worth.
I wouldn't argue with you. As I said, I feel a bit like a Grinch coming here to make this
That's his
statement.
opinion, no. Let's move on. We've got 3 more people for staff, but do you have anyone else want to talk to the delegation? Thanks. Okay, sir, and do you want to move that again now? And a second, that it's delegation be received? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion. Thank you, sir. Now we have Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Boland and Mr. Hammond. Amenities and community contributions are something that has been a topic of conversation since I've been on council, and we've had a myriad of people come to us and speak about community contributions and amenities and how it relates in different cities and municipalities and how challenging it can be. We have that $1,000 a door thing. We have had in previous years organizations that have stepped forward and asked for the community contribution that may have been steered to social housing or another area that we were preferring to parks, and that might have been the field at Bevan Park. I think that we had some monies redirected there, and so I know that we had monies directed to our establishment out there at Dover Bay End, as it relates to the recreation complex and so on. So it has taken place in the past, and the question that I would have, or comment that I would have for staff, is the assessed versus the appraised value, and which one that we. It's an 800% difference here, from 33,000 to 274, or whatever the number is. And I would just ask if that is typical, if that's a typical discrepancy, if you will, or a separation between assessed and appraised, and the validity of same, and what we really look at to adjudicate these requests.
Your Worship, we used appraised value in this case, and there are several examples, I'm sure, within the community where the appraised value is significantly different than the assessed value, because the assessed value hasn't caught up to the real value of the property. And the assessment authority, as I stated earlier, doesn't go out every year and assess every property. It takes a sale in the neighborhood or a reason to look at the property for improvements that maybe through building permits that generates that change. So in this case, it was through the appraised value, which we believe is a more accurate reflection of the value.
Thank you. And Your Worship, I'll just reserve the balance of my comments for debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. My questions have been answered.
Thank you. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Worship. Mine have as well, but the one further question, if I might, through you to staff, Your Worship. Generally, is cash in lieu or a percentage of the land base that's donated to the city of Nanaimo for future development? We have 96% of our land acquisition is already park designated. Is that
96?
96% of our land acquisitions are park?
Generally, that's the way that we achieve them, yes.
Okay. I guess my question is, through you to Mr. Swaby then, was there any consultation with the Stevenson Point neighborhood at all, whether there was a need or requirement for further park development in that area?
Your Worship, thank you for the question. We didn't specifically go into the neighborhood and talk to them about what we were proposing to do. But what we do, because it's council's policy, is that when there's a covenant amendment, we re-notify all the same residents that were notified in the original rezoning application, which explains the proposed change to the covenant and the amount of money and where it was going to be applied and where it's now going to be applied. But we don't physically go out, but we do provide a written documentation to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to the CA1.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. Before I begin, I would like to thank the City of Nanaimo for delivering the notices for this covenant amendment application to my neighborhood. Open communication between the city and her residents is clearly desirable. It binds us together in an open and well-informed way, allowing us to make decisions in a clear, transparent, and unified way. While I wish to speak against granting this application, I would further like to state that organizations such as the United Way, the proposed beneficiary of this application, do great works, and I encourage both residents and businesses to embrace them. I myself belong to a group that receives some funding from the United Way, and am eternally grateful for their support. The covenant now in place commits Century Group to a $60,000 monetary community contribution suggested to be put forward to future parks within the subject area, and I fully support this and believe it should not be amended. Parks and green spaces are clearly very desirable characteristics, which many people have stated for one of the main reasons they love our city. Parks enrich our lives and neighborhoods, providing tranquil, quiet spaces to escape the hub and bub of our ever-increasing busy lives. Parks and green spaces allow our children opportunities to run and play, investigate nature, see birds and wildlife in our ever-densifying city. Parks indeed provide for the betterment of our citizens, our neighborhoods, and our city. Community contributions that set aside monies for future parks and amenities provide for expansion to our park system and should not only be encouraged, but left in place, as not only does it allow for protection of our ever-decreasing natural world, but as well alleviates the burden to taxpayers when it comes to acquiring these spaces and amenities. If this covenant is amended, I worry that this may end up in a slippery slope as to how community contributions are allocated. That is, what is to inhibit a developer in asking for the community contribution that they have been obligated to pay to turn over to an organization? Well, I do not presume to know what goes on in people's minds, and I don't think this would be the same in every case. What I fear, quite possibly, is that community contributions could be dedicated to a nonprofit organization. The developer or person may seek a taxable benefit out of this, and the community is left without these contributions at all. When community contribution agreements are made, they should be held fast, for are they not in place for the betterment of our community? I applaud Century Group for its desire to alleviate United Way of the full purchase price on an office space, and fully encourage them to continue in this endeavor, make their own private $60,000 contribution to the United Way, and seek a charitable tax benefit from it. Therefore, I would like to ask Council to deny this covenant amendment and keep these monies in our park system, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fuller. I might just make the observation that, we will, as a council, hear everyone that's similar to this as a council together. So the chances of somebody, the example you gave of a syndicate or group getting an unfair tax advantage or possibly getting one is very unlikely unless council misunderstands the intent of it, because I think we're going to examine each one very carefully. This one, to my way of thinking, is quite unique because it involves the United Way. I can't think of another example that I would support otherwise. But your point's well taken. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, the staff recommendation is the motion that council approve covenant amendment application CA 1-3443 and 3355 Meadow Lane Road. And the further address is shown below at 3360, 3370, 3312 Hammond Bay Road.
So moved, Your Worship.
Okay, moved. Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Pester, did you want to?
Yes,
go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is to staff, and on page 93 of the report, partially through the existing covenant, it reads, the staff report for the rezoning application suggested that the monies would be put toward future parks within the subject area. And my question is, does this mean that those future parks that were dedicated within the subject area will not occur given this reallocation of the $60,000?
Your Worship, just as a reminder, the dedication of the park was a subdivision requirement, which happens many times throughout the community, of which they don't improve the park. So the amenity contribution is a bonus, if you will, that they were saying we'll put some money towards because of the upzoning, towards the improvements in the park. So the park, in all likelihood, depending on when it is actually dedicated and what purpose we want it to be used for, can either be left as a natural park in its natural state. Some of the subdivisions have naturally treed parks, or would have to be paid through other funds to have it improved, whether it's taxpayers' money or whether it's through development cost charge money or volunteers in parks.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your reply. If I might just follow that up, please. So if I'm not misunderstanding, then the park land that's dedicated to this subject property will remain. It just may remain in its natural state versus a developed state. Is that resonate a little bit easier?
That's correct.
So there's no reason to think that the park that's within the subject area, parkland, that's been dedicated, still may be made available with other funds from other sources, not just ours?
Your Worship, because we haven't done any work on what the park will look like, the dedication typically would occur, and then the Parks Department would start discussing what they want to use the park for. So no decisions have been made in terms of the use of the park and what we might need it to look like. Even with the $60,000 that was proposed to be dedicated, there was no commitments on how we would use the funds, whether it would be for clearing the land, just sodding it, providing play equipment. No decisions were made.
Thank you. So, Your Worship, is it provided for me that the area that was dedicated originally, or whatever that might mean, look like, is not impacted, that it may remain in natural state or otherwise? And given the fact that I think that the request is reasoned and a very rational one for a broad base of people that will be the beneficiaries of this, I will be supporting this particular recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now, this question is through you to staff, and that is that community contributions are considered to be voluntary. I'm correct?
Your Worship, this is a real tricky part of the legislation, of course, you know, from the Development Process Review Committee. And we have many conversations with applicants based on the policies in the OCP about community contributions. And at the end of the day, the covenants and the willingness of the owners to provide the community contribution has to be there, or it won't succeed if it's challenged.
Supplemental. So my point is, I support this recommendation, and that is because they are making a contribution that is considered to be voluntary, and sometimes they have items, charities of choice. I'd like a lot more flexibility on some of these community contributions and the park dedication contributions, and I'd like to see the province give us more flexibility on those items. For example, on the park dedication or cash in lieu, we're only allowed to use it for acquisition. We have got some serious shortfalls in Nanaimo relative to the maintenance of our parks and our facilities, that if we could use some of these monies and had more flexibility, we could do a much better job of looking after those facilities. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Richard. Just for the record, we have had many applications for subdivisions where the question of parks came up, and quite often because of adequate park space being within the vicinity of such a subdivision, we would not insist on that being a park, and it would go into a cash in lieu thing. And I just want to remind everybody that the properties, the subject properties, are very close to Linley East, which is a wonderful and large park, and it's just about as close to DL 56, that huge area of eastern Linley Valley that we also have occupancy right on. So from that point of view, I don't think we're shortchanging anyone by going this way.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just because there are so many different types of language used for this kind of stuff, I just want to make this clear in my own mind. With the subdivision application, there is the sort of fee or tax laid on of either 5% of the property set aside for park, or staff may recommend that we accept cash in lieu of the 5%. That's right. That's not what we're talking about here. That's right. So we're not talking about 5% or cash in lieu. We're talking about an added amenity. So I think that's really important for us to keep straight in our minds, two different things. Because I think this has been framed in such a way that it appears that if we accept the changing of the covenant to take the $60,000 and apply it to the United Way, that we're somehow losing green space. And we're not. We have the same green space as we've always had with this deal. We are just talking about an additional amenity available to the community. And originally it sounds like, to make improvements on the green space. Instead of that, the request is to move it over and use it to assist the United Way in their fundraising efforts and the granting of the funds to different social agencies. So it's kind of unfortunate that it's been framed this way, because it appears that we're trying to trade off green space versus, or that there's an argument between green space versus social services, and that's just not really the case at all. So I think in my mind, so long as I can understand that there's no change whatsoever to the community's green space, simply a change in the service given to our community, i.e. either improvements to a green space or improvements to services available to the community, then I'm great with this. This sounds like a good plan, and I'd have no problem with leaving green space without improvements in lots of different areas, and I think people really appreciate those kinds of green spaces in their neighborhood too. So I'm quite happy to do this, and I will add that it's not uncommon at all for us to hear from an applicant that they would like to use their amenity to go to this particular service. And I remember the applications from lots of liquor retail applicants who wanted to give their funds to treatment centers because the link was really clear. This link maybe isn't as clear, but it's still as valid. So I'm quite happy to support this.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
Well, I think everything's almost been said, but the interesting one on this is similar to like the Oliver Road situation 20-some years ago, where the money was donated for zoning changes, and some of those zonings are only coming to fruition now, 20 years later, from the
good point.
The old divisions there. This subdivision has been on the books for how many years now, with changes?
Your worship, I'm guessing 5 years.
I think it's more like 7, actually, I think it is. But that said, and they've done a lot of things, and I think this is a good contribution that benefits the community. It is different. I'm happy we're doing some things differently sometimes and moving things around. Not only is the Lily Valley Park, Neck Point Park is there, there's Parks Departure Bay, and there's some parks. There still will be parkland because the DCCs, Development Cost Charges, have covered off the 5% parkland. So there won't be an end. We will still maintain those parks once the city takes them to, depending on the level of park that it is, we will maintain it. Or we have VIP volunteers in the park that have developed parks around. So those parks will still exist in those subdivided areas. So this, I believe, although it's different, I understand Mr. Boland's point, Mr. Fuller's, and Mr. Hammond's points too, that it is a bit different, and I'm glad we're talking about it, and there's open debate on it, and I do support the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions or comments from council, and I myself think that it's worthy of support, and I certainly intend to support it myself as well. So, question on the motion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into item B, poverty reduction strategy. Purpose is to petition the provincial government to launch a comprehensive and accountable poverty reduction plan with targets and timelines aimed at eliminating child poverty in our province. The committee recommendation, the motion that council recommend to the province, the provincial province rather, that a poverty reduction plan be developed for the province of British Columbia with effective addresses effectively addresses child poverty. Moved. Second. Discussion. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into the Heritage Tax Exemption Program assessment to be introduced by Heritage Commission Chair, Councillor Diane Brennan. Councillor Brennan? You're on.
I got it. Yep. Thank you. Well, I'm not going to introduce it any more than I would just make the recommendations that Council clarify the role of the Heritage Commission on the Heritage Tax Exemption Program process by directing that the Commission limit recommendations on tax exemption applications to whether or not the project is supportable under the program's conditions, and that the city's adopted heritage policy and guidelines, and adopt Parks Canada standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada as a formal method of evaluating and guiding conservation and alteration of Nanaimo's heritage buildings in the future, and specifically amend Section 7.5 of the Heritage Conservation Areas of the Official Community Plan to include standards and guidelines as the principal set of conservation guidelines for Nanaimo's downtown heritage buildings.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, if I may. I'm a little vague on the mechanics of how this works. So the Heritage Commission comes with a certain degree of importance as far as heritage value is concerned. And by doing that, their job is finished, and then it's up to council to decide what is going to happen. How do I base my decision on the different levels that are possible coming from the Heritage Commission?
If council adopts this process, of course, there would be standards which we would review the application against to quantify and evaluate the heritage value that they're making to the building, at which time we would come up with a value and plug it into the formula that comes up with the tax exemption that we would recommend to council that you apply, which can be up to 10 years or longer if council desires it to be longer.
Follow up, if I may? Yes. So, in other words, you're saying that we as a council then don't have to evaluate the value of the heritage?
Well, we would certainly be making recommendations, and that would include the Heritage Commission to look at the heritage values, and then we would provide that information to council with the recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, can I just ask a question just for clarification? Is there a requirement that the presumably private owner of a heritage building that may intend to apply, is there a requirement that an equal amount of work has to be done to the building? Is it like a facade grant, or is it some improvements, or is it simply just if someone owns a heritage building that's approved under these conditions that they will automatically receive a reduction in taxes?
Mr. Tucker.
The conditions of the program are for seismic, fire suppression, and facade improvements to the building. The maximum amount of the grant is 35% of total project cost. So if the project cost is not substantial, then the amount of the grant available, of course, would be reduced. But the formula is to calculate based on project cost, total project cost, maximum 35%, and then the number of years that the program could apply. There used to be a 10-year maximum in the program. That no longer is there, and it would be up to council to decide how many years they were going to grant the heritage exemption for.
And there's no maximum? I mean, could it go on for 20 years or 25 years? That's a lot of money over a period of time.
Not any longer. The province removed that maximum, but in the review of the program that our heritage planner, Chris Scholberg, carried out, he found that there were no communities anywhere in BC that went beyond 10 years.
Okay.
Everyone seems to have stuck to the 10 years, even though the maximum has been lifted by the province.
And so basically 2/3 of the money would have to be put forward by the owner of the site, and approximately 1/3 would be funded then.
That's correct.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just not quite clear on number 1, where it reads that council clarify the role of the Heritage Commission in the Heritage Tax Exemption Program process by directing that the Commission limit recommendations on tax exemption applications to whether or not the project is supportable under the program's conditions and the city's adopted heritage policy and guidelines. And so what I understand this to read is that the Commission limit recommendations on tax exemption applications, whether or not the project is supportable under the program's conditions. Are we not doing that now?
Your Worship, the confusion has been that they not only recommended the heritage value of the renovations, but they also made recommendations on the length of the term of the tax exemption itself. And it was in this area that we wanted to draw the line in the sand and have them just deal with the heritage issues, and we would deal with the financial end with council.
Thank you. So then somewhere in the report that I would have clarity that that is the line in the sand that we're wishing to change in this first recommendation?
Well, Your Worship, the two recommendations that Mr. Tucker can clarify further go hand in hand, that we're having council consider directing that the Heritage Commission just deal with the heritage values based on its review of the project, subject to the guidelines that you would potentially adopt in recommendation number 2.
But number 2 is strictly about parks.
If I may, Your Worship.
Does parks mean the painted turtle? Or is that the same thing?
Your Worship, Mr. Tucker can explain further. There are standards that Parks Canada has come up for historic places in Canada and buildings.
Thank you.
in answer to the first question, on page 100 of the agendas, you asked about where in the report it was talking. So the role of the commission would be to provide council with a commentary on the heritage value of the building. And that would be the extent of their involvement. The length of the tax exemption, that would be a determination that council would make based on the heritage value. All the heritage buildings are rated on a 1 to 100 scale. And so heritage buildings above 70 are obviously better, have greater heritage value to the community and might be more accepting of a longer term of heritage buildings that are between 50 and 70. Council might decide to give a shorter tax exemption period. So the Heritage Commission would be limited to that role of giving council advice on the heritage value of the building. The second part, the Parks Canada piece, Parks Canada is also responsible for Canada's National Historic Sites, and they are the people who have written the manual that's referred to in this report is sort of the gold standard in terms of heritage restoration, and it's widely used across Canada as the standard by which heritage buildings should be restored. So the recommendation is to use that here in Nanaimo as our recommended standard.
Okay, Mr. Swaby, go ahead. You had something?
Just for council's benefit also, the Free Press building being the last one that council dealt with was an example where the Heritage Commission recommended a 5-year term and staff recommended a 10-year term, which council ultimately adopted. So we're trying to, through this process of review, provide some clarity on what the committee should be looking at.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Tucker and Mr. Swaby. So it's the length, really, that we're in. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
So yeah, I just want to make it clear what it happened is that the commission, given that last decision about the Free Press building, whether it be a 5-year tax exemption or a 10-year tax exemption, it became clear to me that the commission was put in a position under that policy of actually trying to apply tax policy. Tax policy, in my view, falls under the purview of council, not its committees and its commissions. So this was an attempt to make that very clear, what body applies tax policy, what body makes tax policy. And so that's why we did this. And when we talk about heritage value, we're not talking about cash value. We're talking about how important this is to your community, how important this building is, how much this building has changed over the years, how much of the heritage pieces of it have been lost or are maintained. So you might find a building that has one wall that's still heritage, and the rest of the building is new. Should that get the same tax exemption as a building that's been faithfully restored and does maintain its heritage components? And that was the part that the commission wasn't comfortable doing. Council has an opportunity to assess what it sees as the heritage value to the community and can say, okay, maybe it doesn't have as high a heritage score as we might want, but we think it's an important piece of our downtown, and we're going to give it the full tax exemption, which is what we did with the Free Press building. And I don't think that we have a clear way of leveraging into economic development funds. So I think sometimes this was used, and if that's going to be the case, it should be council that does that. Commission shouldn't be charged with the job of determining how heritage value and economic development value fit together. That's our job, and that's what this was intended to do. And in the report, you'll see where we've given, say, $30,000 in tax exemption, say to the Painted Turtle, but they invested $304,000 in our downtown. That's a good trade-off for us, and that's what this is trying to do.
Good, thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the information we're getting. What's the difference between the commission on this? Why are they a commission? Is there any differences in our operating policies of what a commission's responsibility is? Because I like the idea that they're advising us on heritage under the new situation, and the cost, like say, page 99 has the calculation, and then we'll determine, with this in place, then we'll determine the length of time. So the commission question.
Your Worship, there's generally no differences in the Commission's committee other than there might be something in the Act about commissions and their ability to allocate funds, but I'd have to clarify that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that we've moved and seconded both items 1 and 2, Ms. King. So on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into item D, Development Variance Permit DVP 213 at 610 Miller Farm Drive. Purpose to obtain council authorization to vary the provisions of the zoning bylaw in order to vary the height calculation for 11 proposed residential lots. Staff recommendation is before you there, and if somebody would like to make the motion.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. E, Development Variance Permit DVP 216 at 1844 Meredith Road. Purpose to obtain council authorization to vary the lot depth and the rear and front yard setback provisions of the zoning bylaw in order to permit a 3-lot subdivision.
Your Worship, I'll move that council direct staff to proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit DVP 216 at 1844 Meredith Road.
Okay, is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Discussion? I see none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into Development Variance Permit DVP 217 at 680 Trans-Canada Highway. Purpose to obtain council authorization to vary the provisions of sign type, area, and height of the sign bylaw in order to permit 2 LED signs at the Departure Bay Ferry Terminal.
Your Worship, I move that council direct staff to proceed with this required statutory notification for DVP 217 at 680 rather. We don't want everybody having signs down there. Sorry, 680 Trans-Canada Highway.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Did Councillor? Discussion. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship, to staff, if I may. Does this mean that the audio announcements that BC Ferries carries on right now, that they will be terminated and we'll just be dealing with LED?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship, that's our understanding.
Okay. Mr. Tucker, you took a breath and then you changed your mind? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Swee. Okay, I see no further questions on that. On the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item G, Development Variance Permit DVP 218 at 701 5800 Turner Road. And the purpose is to obtain council authorization to vary the provisions of the sign bylaw in order to allow a fascia sign above the roof line of the A&W restaurant building.
Your Worship, I move that council direct staff to proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit DVP 218 at 701 5800 Turner Road.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion? I see none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving over to item H has been pulled. Moving into item I, Property Maintenance Bylaw 1990, number 3704. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the property maintenance for the properties listed below. And the staff recommendation by motion is that council, pursuant to the Property Maintenance Bylaw 1990, number 3704, direct the owners of the following properties to remove the materials as listed below by the premises within 14 days, or the work will be done by the city or its agents at the owner's cost. Number 1 has been pulled if you haven't got an adjusted copy. Number 2 is 5 Gillespie Street. Discarded lumber, household garbage, discarded furniture, discarded toys, and miscellaneous debris. I think the picture you can see on the screen behind me. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to 5 Gillespie Street? The next property is 540 Rose Hill Street, box spring, broken shelving unit, yard waste, cat litter, and miscellaneous debris. The pictures again are before you. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to 540 Rose Hill Street? And the third and final property, number 4, has been pulled, so it is number 5 on your agenda, 1505 Frew Road, discarded wood and wood debris, metal and metal debris, wire debris, household appliances, household furnishings, automobile parts, branches, garden debris, plastic and plastic debris, derelict bicycles, bicycle parts, and miscellaneous debris. Is there anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to property at 1505 Frew Road? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move the motion.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Moving into unresolved building deficiencies, bylaw contravention notices. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below, and the staff recommendation that by motion that council instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 5.7 of the Community Charter. The first property is 649 Lambert Street. Illegal secondary suite, illegal construction, construction of a secondary suite, construction of living space within existing garage, construction of a staircase, construction of a two-piece bathroom without a building permit. Is there anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to 649 Lambert Avenue? The next property is at 687 Albert Street. Conditions of permit not completed and expired permit. Is there anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to 687 Albert Street? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move the recommendation. Move. Second. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to corporate services. Minutes of the Grants Advisory Committee meeting held Wednesday, 2013, August 21. Actually, I think we could probably, can we do all three at the same time? A, B, and C?
Your Worship, the minutes are on the agenda for receipt only. There's no motion required.
Okay. So we'll just move right down into C then. And that's the 2013 permissive tax exemption and security check grant applications to be introduced by Grants Advisory Committee Chair, Councillor Diana Johnston. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move committee's recommendation that council award a permissive tax exemption for the 2014 tax year to the Radio Malaspina Society PTE 02 based on 20% of the assessed value of the property leased at 25 Front Street.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Discussion. I think we'll obviously do these seriatim.
If council wishes to do them separately, that's perfectly fine.
Well, I think in this case there's a award or deny, so I think we're probably better to do them seriatim.
Certainly, Your Worship.
Okay. Yeah.
Worship, if I may just ask a question, please.
Sure.
Is there more than one intake on the PTEs, or is there more? Do we accept
Mr.
PTEs
Sweeney?
on more than one occasion throughout the calendar year?
Mr. Howard, do you want to?
Your Worship, the PTE bylaw is adopted annually by council, and it has to be adopted, I believe, before October 31st.
And then the intake of, sorry, Your Worship, if I may. So the intake then of requests for exemptions can happen at any time after that's been adopted?
Your Worship, for the property tax exemptions, they can apply throughout the year, but council can only adopt the bylaw once in October for the following tax year. So the bylaw adoption that's before council right now would be for the 2014 tax year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
And we have down to Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now, I'm a little concerned that, here we are in October, and I know that those are the rules, but we're just starting budget debate for next year, and this permissive tax exemptions may, in fact, be a subject item for discussion for the upcoming 2014 budget. And I'm concerned if we approve all these tonight, that it'll give us no flexibility relative to our budget discussions.
Fair question. Mr. Swaby, do you or staff have a comment on that? Go ahead. Mr. Howard?
Your Worship, it's a correction. I mentioned earlier that the bylaw is in front of council tonight. It's not. This is just a direction for council or for staff to prepare the bylaw. So there is two more opportunities for council to consider these. It's just that the bylaw has to be adopted by the end of October. So given the direction that we get tonight, the bylaw would be prepared for the next council meeting in October.
Your worship, just further to that, for the timing likely is so that the individual organizations can prepare their budgets for moving forward into the next year. And I agree with Councillor McKay, we will be talking specifically about these issues, but that's the unfortunate timing we have with the organizations and the deadline.
Okay. Councillor Westwick, do you have
Thank you, Worship. So this is the 11th hour for an intake for permissive tax exemptions for 2013.
Be for 2014.
For 2014. So, but we're going to adopt the bylaw in October for 2014.
Yes.
So would we not adopt the bylaw for 2014 and then accept intake for permissive tax exemptions after we've adopted the 2014 bylaw, or we would do it the other way around?
No, Your Worship, the permissive tax exemption bylaw specifically lists the properties that council wishes to exempt taxes for 2014.
Well, this specifically lists the ones that have applied for it, not this specifically the list that we, well, correction, that has come to us from the Grants Advisory Committee. But it seems odd to me that we're going to adopt the policy in October for 2014, yet we're going to approve exemptions for 2014 before that policy is adopted.
No, the committee recommendations essentially are giving staff direction to prepare the bylaw with these properties included on them. So if council proceeds with awarding these PTEs or accepting the committee recommendations to include these properties in the permissive tax exemption bylaw, then staff will prepare a draft bylaw for council for October to consider with these properties listed.
And this will not be the only opportunity for PTEs for 2014?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what.
This is the only opportunity.
This is the only opportunity.
For applications before, they must be in before October 31st.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
And we have to vote on that one, Your Worship.
Yeah, so on 1, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 2, I think, is effectively removed because of the vote for 1.
No, it's different. The
Oh,
second
okay.
one
Oh,
is
well,
to
we have to actually vote on it then.
to deny the Radio Malaspina Society PTEO to a cash in lieu of 2013 taxes in the amount of $12,600.
Seconder? Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Patchy?
Just a question, Your Worship. Is this then the Commission's decision because they were too late, or how did you get to that?
All 2013 requests for cash in lieu have been denied. It was a policy set down and approved by this council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brennan, did you have something to add?
Yes, I do. Because I sense that there's a great deal of confusion around this. And when we see the PTE for the 2014 year, that starts January 1st. When we see the cash in lieu for 2013, that means that those people missed last October's deadline, and they're no longer qualify for a tax exemption. But so they're asking for council to grant them cash instead of it. So you're dealing with 2 different taxation years here.
Which we don't
So
have.
that's what we need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, good point.
I know it says that, but I'm sensing that we're not all on the same page with it. And I just wanted to clarify that because.
And furthermore, there's
maybe
no money in the
didn't-
grants pot.
Budget.
Budget.
Okay, good clarity. Thank you.
And so that we have to vote on that one, Your Worship.
So, on 2, all those in favor to deny? Opposed? Motion carries into 3.
Be awarded permissive tax exemption for the 2014 tax year to the Redeemed Christian Church of God, PTEO 4.
Seconder? Moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 4, awarded permissive tax exemption for the 2014 tax year to the Lighthouse Bible Baptist Church, PTEO 5.
Seconder? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And number 5.
Deny a permissive tax exemption for the 2014 tax year to the Nanaimo Gymnastics School PTE 06.
Seconder? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And number 6.
And to deny the Nanaimo Gymnastics School PTE 06 a cash in lieu of 2013 taxes in the amount of $17,431.70.
Seconder? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Number 7.
Deny a permissive tax exemption for the 2014 tax year to the Nanaimo Economic Development Corporation PTE 07.
Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Brennan opposed. Balance of councillor in favor. The motion passes.
Number 8, award a permissive tax exemption for the 2014 tax year to the Nanaimo Church of the Nazarene PTE 08.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion
And to
carries.
award a security check grant to St. Paul's Anglican Church SC 01 in the amount of $60.
Seconded. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, you opposed? Yes. Okay. Councillor McKay opposed on item 9. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes.
Volunteers.
Moving into community services, there are none. Into 11. And bylaws with no accompanying report. So, what is this? Let's go on. 11, subsection 1, motion that the...
I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.044 RA 314 to rezone property at 3690 Country Club Drive from single-family residential R1 to residential corridor in order to construct a 4-story multi-family development past third reading.
Moved and seconded. And then we have Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I just, first of all, want to thank staff, Mr. Mousseau in particular, for providing me with some additional traffic information on the Warsall Way, Departure Bay Road intersection. I'm more comfortable with that aspect now. And I want to thank you and the councillors present at September 5 public hearing for understanding my concern and having given me the extra 2 weeks to think about this. I'll be supporting.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this too, but like Councillor Padgey, I had some questions. It never feels very good. Perhaps it's seen as imposing density on a neighborhood that's not keen on it and has some fairly strong arguments against it. But in this case, we have the official community plan. We have developed transportation corridors. We've developed transportation schemes for where the buses exchange. There's just all sorts of reasons why this fits with the overall plan that we've developed for our community. And it just seems that we are sort of, we have a policy. We need to adhere to our policies and not do ad hocery. And I think it's a well thought out plan, and I think it works in this instance. And I hope the neighborhood, once there is a light at Rock City, will sort of be happier with this change and adjust to the change in their density. Okay. It's not a huge change, but it is a change for the immediate neighbors.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add that I also will be supporting this motion. And actually, I was going to mention just what you touched on now. I know that at the present time, the traffic signal at the Rock City Road intersection is not in the 5-year plan, but I would think that as the traffic problem is exacerbated, as it will be, presumably, it'll put more pressure on the city to look at getting a light in there earlier, and there are other plans by a developer across the highway that also may trigger earlier installation of that sign. Traffic signal, I'm sorry. So I do support it as well. I know there's concern from the community and certainly residents in that area, but I do think we'll be able to see our way through it. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting this amendment as well. I feel very strongly that it's going to be a quality development and will add very much to the neighborhood. There was an inherent traffic problem there prior to this development being proposed, Your Worship, and I doubt very much they're going to add that much more to the density of travel. Because of the type of development it is, I think a lot of people will be walking and accessing the other transportation routes. So I think it'll be a quality development in a good neighborhood. So I present it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I'll be supporting it as well, for all the reasons just previously mentioned by Councillor Johnston and Councillor Brennan. It fits the official community plan and so on and so forth. I was concerned with the traffic on Country Club because I heard a lot about the traffic. I walked by there, excuse me, I walked by there on E&N Trail once a day, and I ride my bike once a day by there, and I always take a look down since this has been brought to us. And I see absolutely very little traffic on Country Club, so every time I go down. So I have no problem supporting this.
I think Councillor McKay has a comment, but I just wanted to add one thing that I had made a note on and missed. Two things, actually. One is that there is probably the most convenient bus exchange almost across the street there, with a huge selection of choices, and really one of the mandates of council and one of the things that we're trying to aggressively promote to the public is the need to take alternate sources. And while Councillor Greaves is riding his bicycle, and certainly Councillor Anderson as well, I believe Councillor Greaves is probably riding more than Councillor. Anyway, but I think the opportunity to ride the buses are important, and they're there. And the other point is that an anecdotal story was mentioned about somebody with mobility in a wheelchair that had challenges, and the grade there was important. And I think this individual related how great it was to. Please turn off your microphone. How important it was to have that access. So anyway, I totally support you. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I can guarantee you that both Councillor Greaves and Anderson ride their bikes considerably more than both you and I do.
You're
but
absolutely right.
One of the things that the public hearing brought forward was the fact that people in the Country Club area have got considerable angst about the traffic flow on Norwell, Country Club, and in and out of that subdivision. There's no doubt about it, particularly trying to come out of Departure Bay and that whole Country Club area to head south on the Old Island Highway. So what it really did for me was to understand that this development is not responsible for making improvements to that area, but that we are. And it really woke us up, I think, to move ahead and encourage the developer across the highway to move ahead with the Rock City intersection and give those folks in those neighborhoods some relief on traffic flow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was the last speaker. So on the motion, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving in.
Beneficial Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2013, number 6500.024, OCP 74, to redesignate properties at 2113 to 2129 Boxwood Road from light industrial to neighborhood to recognize and permit expansion of an existing personal care facility. Edgewood be adopted.
Second motion. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And 3, that zoning amendment bylaw 2013, number 4500.046, RA 318, to rezone property at 2113 2129 Boxwood Road from single dwelling residential R1 and duplex residential R4 to community service 1 CS1 in order to expand the adjacent personal care facility. Edgewood be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Discussion none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And 4, that zoning amendment bylaw 2013, number 4500.047, RA 321, to rezone properties at 5709 Ocean View Terrace / 5620 Hammond Bay Road from single dwelling residential R1 to row house residential R7 in order to permit 2 row housing units on each lot, be referred back to staff for report on access.
Okay, motion to refer. Go ahead.
And I was just going to bring up, if I may speak, to why I'm bringing
Okay, it's been seconded. Go ahead.
The reason I'm bringing this up, there was a lot of discussion at the public hearing regarding the access to the property, not so much the row house development. And the density would stay exactly the same no matter what, if this row housing was allowed or whether there was the single-family dwellings that were put there. But the access to the property was an issue, and on that vote it failed 4-3. So referring this back to staff, hopefully we can find a way to clarify the access issues so that this can potentially go forward. So that's the reason why I'm bringing this motion.
So, Councillor Kip, on the motion on the floor now is to refer.
Yeah, no, Your Worship, I didn't attend that meeting, but I've read all of the information on that public hearing. Quite an intense public hearing, actually, and a lot of talk about traffic and that. I was wondering on this one, it says to be abandoned, but you're changing that to be referred back.
Yes.
One of the questions through to staff, this type of row housing creates a mix of housing in that area. Is that supported by the OCP?
Worship, supported the rezoning application.
Thank you very much. I support the motion.
Okay, good. The next is Councillor Paget. This is on the motion to refer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also would like to know from staff, or explain at least to those in the neighborhood, that there is a certain amount of infrastructure in the ground at this particular development, which obviously is not going to be used for this purpose. Is that conducive to eventually, if we ever get there, be used for something different?
Your Worship, certainly if the applicant went ahead and installed infrastructure that was in advance of approvals, that's his risk, but I anticipate the type of infrastructure that was included in this application could be used for either single family or row housing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. I support the motion. Just a question to staff. It reads, in order to permit 2 row house units on each lot. And I'm just wondering if we refer it back to staff, if it ultimately ends up not 2 row house units on each lot. Might there be opportunity to alter, like since this is what the motion says, might it be able to be something less than?
Your Worship, referring it back, of course, means that we will be returning, there will be new information, we'll be returning to a public hearing. It's important if council believes that there's something else you desire, you should provide us direction now, but we would go back to the neighborhood now with the revised application.
Okay.
Sorry. So after this will go to another public hearing?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think normally we don't debate an issue, a referral motion, but in this case, I know there's a lot of concern in the area about it, and certainly on council, so we've allowed it for that reason. But I think one of the things I'm hoping will come out of the referral is that staff will come back and deal with access and egress, and particularly that tree on this island that at this time precludes left turn on, I guess, more or less eastbound traffic. Yes, and I'm sure that'll come up in the...
Yes, Your Worship. Reading into what council, into the debate, you would like some options on how you access this development. If we change the access, that's why we would go back to the neighborhood and have a public hearing.
Good. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded on the motion to refer. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that 5 zoning amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.049 RA320 to rezone properties at 6010 and 6016 Tweedsmuir Crescent from single dwelling residential R1 to single dwelling residential small lot R2 in order to facilitate subdivision be adopted.
Seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the bylaw status sheet. 12 is correspondence not related to a report to council. If somebody would like to move the correspondence, move receipt. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? If there's business arising, I might just mention on that, just for the benefit of council and perhaps people at home, we did earlier ask if this particular group, maybe I might just quickly read. The letter was dated 2013 September 2 from the Ukrainian Canadian Civil Liberties Association requesting the council unveil a plaque on 2014, August 22nd at 11 a.m. to participate in a cascading wave of plaque unveiling from coast to coast, 100 years to the day on which the War Measures Act was announced. We did point out to staff got a hold of the particular group, the Ukrainian Canadian Civil Liberties Association, and pointed out that a plaque was placed located at the bottom of the footpath at Newcastle Park, adjacent to the Nanaimo Yacht Club, commemorating the 200 Ukrainians and other Eastern European immigrants who were interned as enemy aliens during World War I. But it's my understanding back from them that they were aware that this plaque existed, and they still would like council to consider another one. So that's the issue. And Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I would move that we accept the request to unveil the plaque commemorating the...
a new plaque.
Yes, accept a new plaque, and that we unveil it with the rest of Canada on the 22nd of August 2014.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Kidd.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This one I was involved on council back in 1997, and actually on Parks and Rec when we did this. There was quite some debate about it. Interestingly enough, my mother arrived and was born in Canada in 1913, 1 year before this, of Ukrainian family, and they were never interned, but some of the relatives were. So I believe it's a good thing for us to remember these type of historical things where people were taken in as sort of enemy aliens of the state, and so that they can be thought of and maybe looked at differently in the future. So I think it's important. Thank you.
Good point. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Council appointments, there's none. We notice a motion, there are none. Under item 15, other business, I think Councillor Johnston wanted to make a comment?
Yes, just quickly, Your Worship, I'd just like to acknowledge the great spirit of community that our city always, it's a great experience to go out among the different community centres on the weekends and see what our citizens are doing on behalf of ourselves. This past weekend, Neck Point Park, I went to attend the tree planting there. There were over 300 trees initiated by the Parks Department, and 100 volunteers from 4 years to 60 or 70 were planting trees, and in 15 minutes they planted 300 trees. And then on the other side, the Azanta Club were doing their shoreline cleanup. So it was wonderful for Environmental Week to see the great spirit that our citizens portray, and I'd like to thank them on behalf of council.
Thank you for bringing that forward. That's great. Yeah, well done. Okay, that's other business, and now we move into the question period, which are agenda items only.
Fred Taylor, I would like to ask if community contributions donated to charity, which some developers' ears really perked up behind me tonight, get a tax receipt, would be deducted from anybody that receives them, any charity, if they apply to grants and aid. In other words, we're not given money twice, through grants and aid and through community contributions.
Maybe, Mr. Swaby, do you want to comment on that? If they're registered charity, well, I'll let you speak.
Sorry, Your Worship, Mr. Taylor brings up a point that several councillors have been asking about that we'll be reviewing as part of moving forward with this issue, so that we understand all of the grants and all of the contributions that the community is making to them.
And I know there's legislation for churches to be exempt, but anybody else that's exempt on property taxes that receives a large amount of, say they become a favorite place to get the tax exemption certificates, could that diminish as well, the exemption for property taxes, if we're giving it to them a value in some other way?
we heard today, Mr. Taylor, there, we were reminded by staff that the matter of permissive exemptions for churches was determined by the province, not the city on it.
I said legislation.
Yes, but I'm just clarifying the legislation is provincial. But the other thing is that does not accept the parking and additional areas that are not used for church, which can be.
Right, and if they are become a favorite for these community contributions, I think it needs to play a role into the amount, we can't give out everything from every direction.
Go ahead.
Now, through a question to the staff, if the person donates $60,000, that's tax. Did they get a taxable benefit on that? That would go in as their cost of doing business for producing that subdivision.
Your Worship, I'm sure you're correct, and I'm sure even contributions for the parks have some creative ways of becoming some form of write-off as well.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. With regard to 8A, I would like to know who set the appraised value of number 9 at 327 Credo at $275,000.
Your Worship, we don't have the name in front of us. It's an accredited appraiser, and that's what we're looking for is the qualification. We can certainly get that information for council if they require it.
Thank you.
And does that mean, given that you're decided tonight to take $60,000 from the public purse and to give it to the United Way for the purchase of number 9 Credo, does that guarantee that the price of $215,000 to the United Way, or from the United Way to the developer?
Well, that's an understanding that was the agreed price, but staff may want to expand on that. Mr. Sway, sorry. Go ahead.
Certainly, in circumstance, we understand there's a contract for sale for that price. So that's what we're looking for is the appraised value minus this amount, and that the real estate transaction would take place at that value.
Thank you, Mr. Eward.
Okay. Do we have any prices for comparable units in that building?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know if staff has any comments on that.
Your Worship, as Mr. Seward said, there's an appraisal on the property valuing the land in question, the parcel in question.
Yep.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconder, we stand adjourned. I was looking at Councillor Anderson.